Hi all, welcome to the next edition of AmnicCast. Today we have Melissa Parker, who leads DevOps in a large insurance company. Her journey is like pretty impressive in terms of where she started as an administrative assistant to helping people in terms of their issues on the computer to now she's a DevOps. So it's an inspiring journey, I think. Welcome, Melissa. Why don't you introduce yourself and just take us through your journey?
Thank you. I'm Melissa Parker. I am a DevOps engineer, like you said, at a large insurance company, and I'm in central New Jersey. So I started out probably about 26 years ago on the help desk, and then managed to make my way into DevOps after having a bunch of different roles in IT. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Why don't you just take us through the journey, right? I know from an administrative assistant, you had a lot of ops, and then
Yes.
every op moved you to the next level to a DevOps, right? I think it'll
Yes.
be like really nice to understand how did you transition into where you are.
So I started as an administrative assistant in a company that provided data for advertising agencies. And in that company, I was helpful to a lot of people when they had technical issues with either the word processing software or printers and things like that. And that company decided to start an internal help desk for employees, and they asked me to be a help desk analyst. And so that's how I got my start. And then after I was there for a while, I started to ask questions, and I had a lot of helpful colleagues that really showed me the ropes when it came to IT. And because it was a smaller organization, I had the opportunity to play many roles. So I got to supervise the help desk, I got to purchase licenses, I got to procure hardware, I did system administration work. And then I left that company and got into quality assurance and production support. I loved that job. And then the economic downturn happened in 2008. And so I ended up at this insurance company that I'm with now. And even there, I played a number of roles. So I got to do change and release management. I did some project management. And then in about 2018, the company decided to be more agile and started down the DevOps path. And so I got to be on a team where I wrote chef scripts and built infrastructure with Terraform. And then, unfortunately, more organizational change happened, and I stepped away from it for a minute to do some project management work. And then in 2020, I got to join a full-fledged DevOps team, where I not only got to build the infrastructure, but I also got to maintain the pipeline for CI/CD for the investments applications. And so it's been about 4 years now, and now I'm leading the DevOps Center of Excellence along with a team of about four or five other engineers.
I think that's an amazing journey. On the way, I think you also took your graduation in computer science,
Oh,
right? Like,
yes, I forgot about getting my degree. So for a long time, I just had graduated high school and I just took knowledge from other people. And then in 2007, I decided that I really wanted to delve deeper into computer science. So I went for a online degree. And it took me about 4 years. It was tough to manage working full time and doing the studies. But in the end, it was really rewarding experience to to walk across that stage, especially in computer science because there's not a lot of women. So it was interesting.
awesome. I think just moving into the next one, right? Like, how do you, so as a DevOps center of excellence and like a DevOps developer experience, like what are some of the challenges that you have seen in building that kind of a developer experience?
Well, I think a big challenge has been some of the technology being older and maybe it not being as fast or as user friendly for the developers that we work with. And so, a lot of the feedback we get is, hey, if it's automated, why is it so slow? I don't understand how to interpret the log when something breaks in the pipeline. And then, there's a lot of intervention needed from the DevOps team when things go wrong because there's like issues with observability. And because, it almost felt like we were a little siloed in our own private tower, we're really trying to do better this year with communicating. So we've started some roundtables and like other communication sessions with the application development teams that we support because we want to bring value to them, and if we're not making that developer experience kind of useful to the development teams, then it's almost like, what's our purpose? And we have been getting good feedback, from the developers about what we need to improve. And so we're trying to just fashion our roadmap for, the next 3 years to focus on improvements in terms of the tools that we're using, tightening up security, and then making it so that the developers can kind of do more self-service activities without, submitting lots of requests and waiting for days for us to turn things around. That way they can get onboarded and use the automation a lot more, because we're at maybe about 46% of the eligible applications using the pipeline. And, ideally we'd like to see that number like way over 75%. So we're working towards that.
Got it. And when you talk about developer experience, right, there are multiple aspects of it, right? One is like what constitutes it, right? You talked about there is a CI/CD pipeline, provisioning, right? And then there is also security aspect of it, right?
Yes.
Can you walk us through like what all constitutes when you envision a developer experience for your teams to use it?
Yeah, well, first off, it would be that they can actually start using the automation right away, without us directing them to, 14 Confluence pages with all different, screenshots and things like that. Something that they can start using the automation really quickly. So that's the first thing. The other thing would be that we have like centralized logging, where they can see what's going on with their pipeline, and whether there's any issues with either the libraries that they're using, or whether they have secrets present that they shouldn't have, right? They need to be able to see that, and the pipeline needs to run a lot faster than it runs. In some cases, 40 minutes, right? What's the difference between manual and automated pipelines if it takes so long? So we're really trying to reduce that deployment time for them, and have less error-prone pipeline, right? If it's constantly breaking at the different integration points, that's also another problem area. So I think if we improved upon these things, and then give them some capability to work with mobile applications as well, overall, I think they'd be a happier bunch.
No, no, but one of the things coming from a developer background, right? It's always that I'm used to certain way of doing.
Mhm.
Now you are trying to tell me a platform that I have to get used to, right? What kind of challenges did you face, and how do you break that silos to make sure that everybody starts using the platform, right?
Well, we kind of been doing some roadshows to break down how our pipeline works, and to explain, which teams support us, because in a big company, a lot of times you don't have your hands on the infrastructure. So if something breaks, they're reporting to me, but I also need to go report that to somebody else and kind of work in the background. So we've been kind of explaining those points to them, and then asking them for honest feedback about what they want to see. And then another part of it has been us evaluating all of the tools that we have, to see where the gaps are. So we know we're using Jenkins. There's better tools out there. There's better ways for us to integrate with GitHub, and there's just more modern ways of approaching things. And so we're considering that and just looking at the different tools that's out there. And security has become a concern as well. So we're taking a look at what we can do to make things more secure, but in a way that it's not interrupting their productivity.
And to just bootstrap this developer experience, was it like you had to find a team that buys into it and then make a success story? So I'm just trying to look at, like, in a large organization, how do you make them believe that, hey, this is the right tool for me to use, right? How did you do that?
Well, we asked for their feedback as developers, for one, right? So we really just sent out a large broadcast to everybody that we know, or what we call our frequent customers, the people that we interact with the most. And we asked them for their suggestions. And we also had some demos from outside vendors, right? Come in and show us the tool. And then we got feedback from that as well. So there's a couple of applications that we're looking at still. And a lot of times when you bring the vendor in, right, it's a very sales pitch oriented type of session. So the feedback we got is like, hey, can we have some technical deep dives, right, and look into the finer workings of these applications. So we're reviewing a couple of platforms, and really just being more careful to take into consideration the developer itself rather than just thinking about us as a DevOps team, because we're not baked into their daily process. And, so sometimes you lose track of what their pain points are. But I think, once you gain a better understanding of what the problems are, then you can really come up with an ideal solution that kind of works for everyone. Because there's different business units and they all have, their different focus and things like that. And, some things may work for one team, whereas, another team is not, so interested. But, really, it's just been about conveying how much we want to help them and make their lives better on a daily basis. And, once we said that, then we had, plenty of people raising their hand to come and give feedback, because they don't see us as, some separate team that's just, coming up with things for them to use that aren't useful to them in their daily work.
Got it. And on the DevOps part of it, right? One part of it is to obviously you have the power to provision and run the cloud. That also means cost is something that has to be managed, right?
Yes.
So how do you manage that? How do you make sure that your cloud runs in a very efficient way?
Well, one way is through, the console that we use in Amazon really has some great tools for measuring cost. So that's one way. And where I am, they do have a dedicated FinOps team. But when we're coming up with solutions and proposing solutions, we really try to take into consideration what's going to be the total cost of ownership of this at the end, right? And is what we're choosing really right sized for the particular use case that we're trying to work on? Because in the beginning, I think there was a big stampede, right? It was, you must leave the on-prem environment and move to the cloud. And so everyone ran into the cloud. And then, as the company started looking at costs, we realized, like, wow, we're not saving money. In some cases, we really expanded cost in a crazy way. So in the past maybe year or so, it's been all about right sizing and making sure that when we even start off with a business case, right, let's do that analysis and make sure that, what we're proposing makes sense and that it actually is going to be cost effective, to move to the cloud.
Interesting. And is that like at what phase of your process that you start looking into what will be the cost of running this on the cloud, right? Is it in the design phase? Or
it's in the business case phase. They started, and then in the design phase, it goes a little bit deeper in. But they've got some calculator that they've introduced at our recommendation to go ahead and just really take a look at what we're going to spend here and make sure it makes sense before we even get into designing. Because I think before we would just, come up with something and then, let's implement it without really thinking through, because it's more than just the compute part, right? So the server costs on the face of it looks, really cost effective. But then, how much data is coming in and out of the system, right?
Yeah.
How much are we storing, right? Are we archiving? Why are we even maintaining, some of this data? So we're really trying to take more of that into consideration when coming up with solutions.
Awesome. When you talk about data, right, how do you manage that part of it, right? The stored data or network data, how do you make sure that they are under check and suddenly there is no spike in that? Because you can always measure the EC2s or like the actual compute and storage. How do you manage the network and the data that is being stored?
Well, I think overall the company has a data retention policy. So that does help to a certain extent because there's time limits on the type of data that you can keep things around. But overall, it really has been more of a manual effort, I think, from other teams to let us know, like, you're exceeding, this level of data, right? Please clean up, right? We see things here. It's too much. We do use the FSX service. And so, and S3. And so, sometimes you tend to get carried away and think it's unlimited. But, there's a big push from the top of the company that helps with that in terms of keeping the amount of data that you retain very low. And then, if you're not going to be accessing something, then by all means, it's an object, put it in Glacier, right? Or, some longer term option so that it's not just all there, just running up the cost. Even though it's relatively cheap, once you have thousands of people, then, it gets expensive very quickly. And the other thing we've been doing too is, encouraging people to clean off the the ephemeral drives that they have attached to the EC2 instances as well. And so there's some nice notification system that warns you when you get to, like, I think 90% consumption, and tells you, you've hit the limit now. You need to clear some space.
Got it. Actually, the glacier stuff is really nice. Are there any other tips that you have on your stuff that, hey, these are some of the checklists that I run through to make sure that the cost is efficient?
Other than Glacier, I think that's the main one that we use for the S3. But otherwise, it really is just changing the culture, because people feel like they need to hold on to everything, and it's like, do you really need to store your email, from 5 years ago? No, you don't, right? And so we're kind of schooling people on what to keep and what not to keep, and encouraging people to just delete it if you don't need it, right? And if you really, really have to have it, let's archive things in a way that makes sense, and let's not keep it on, the server necessarily, right?
Got it. Thanks for that. And again, like you have transitioned over from administrative assistant to DevOps. Like, how do you view AI, generative AI? Are you starting to look at it from the DevOps perspective in terms of how that's going to start impacting some of the practices that you do?
We think it could be very helpful. I mean, the company itself is a little fearful of AI, but independently within our team, we're very interested in exploring AI and seeing what it can do, for not just for the DevOps pipeline, but for other activities that we do in terms of supporting people. Because people having to enter tickets all the time and figure out things were broken and report it. If we had AI involved to kind of keep us more on track with that and kind of automate a little bit of that process, we think it would make things way more efficient. So I know my company does have some focus group that's looking at how we can introduce AI. So for now, we're a little bit restricted, but on my personal time, I do a lot of investigating into it, and have started to use it for things like updating my profile on LinkedIn and things like that. But I really would like to expand it so that we can use it on a day-to-day basis in the workplace.
But have you tried creating like Terraforms over generative AI or any of these Helm charts or like anything on CI/CD pipeline, like
No, I
Copilot?
have not played with any of that yet. I haven't. I haven't done it yet. But a couple of my colleagues have, and they said it was really interesting. They're like, just go have it write a program for you, and and see what it does. It's pretty impressive, from what I can see.
Got it. I think we are almost coming towards the end of it. Anything that you want to share to the viewers, summarizing your expertise and hey, these are my takeaways over my past journey kind of stuff?
Um, well, I wanted to ask you a question. What inspired you to found Amnic?
Okay, that's an interesting stuff. Uh, like in my previous companies, right, for about 10 plus years, I have been scaling systems, saw the transition from on-prem to cloud, and then ran like really large scale systems on different clouds. But in those days, we were running really faster. So the reliability and how quickly you can scale was the norm. So when I got the thought, what would you want to do? How could you run the cloud in an efficient way so that you are not just reliable, you are not just scaling, but also you are scaling it efficiently, right? I think that's the genesis of Amnic, and then that's how we started off Amnic, right?
Very interesting.
Awesome. Anything else that you want to share?
Just overall, right? Never be afraid to dip into something that you don't know about necessarily. Because starting out my career, I thought I would be a professional administrative assistant for my entire career, and it turned into something else. And I feel really rewarded by my career in IT, and very proud of the journey. And never be afraid to ask questions. You'll always find someone that is willing to share knowledge. And that's been the best part of all of it. Just learning from other people and their experience. So don't be afraid to do something different. And you never know where it will lead you.
I think it's been an impressive and an inspiring journey, right? From being from an administrative assistant to learning computer science and then being part of multiple journeys to actually being on the computers and DevOps and being able to scale the system. It's like amazing. Thanks, Melissa, for being part
Yeah,
of this podcast. Really nice having you.
it was great to
Thank
be here. Thank you so much, Satish.
Thank you.